did was a investigator. She's actually my aunt. She works for the Brownsville Police Department. She's a child abuse investigator, and with the sexual crimes as well. So we interviewed her on how like she helps with Monica and Maggie's house, and she said she basically like responds to like a call, and since she can't personally talk to the child, and none of her like coworkers can, she takes the child and their family to Monica and Maggie's house, and then that's where they do the interviews and like get more with like more of the information they need for the investigation. So that was the last person I interviewed.
The last person that I interviewed was a therapist at Monica's house. I basically just asked her like what her job was, how she got into becoming a therapist, and how she like got to working at Monica's house, and yeah, that's it.
Okay, so I'm gonna start with you. What is your name and what is your position here?
My name is Melanie Palomo, and I'm an assistant district attorney here with the Child Abuse Unit.
So what is your connection with Monica's house, and what is your main focus in helping them?
Well, our main connection with Monica's house is, like you spoke to the detective, that's where the children are interviewed. So a lot of times by the time we get the case and the case has been investigated, we have those interviews between the forensic interviewer and the child. So that's used as part of our evidence and what we look at when we're, gonna file a case or file charges against somebody. So that's our connection with them. When we do proceed to trial, we bring in that forensic interviewer. We do talk to them about the interview, and they do testify in court for that child. I'm also a board member on the CCACWC, it's really long.
Okay, yes.
So I'm a board member as well, so I kind of see a different aspect of that as well. But usually, I know our office is really open to, providing as much support as we can for the CAC because they are so helpful in the investigative process.
Okay. And so how do you kind of like, as you said, they do testify, so do you like help them understand what's happening, like before they're gonna testify? Like, do you prepare them?
Yes, usually we go through things of the interview, things that we want them to cover. We obviously don't tell them what to say, but there's different information that they're able to provide to kind of educate the jury on what they do, because there's such a specialized nonprofit organization in what they do. They're able to kind of let the jury know and kind of educate them on what it is, on how they question kids and how they're able to get that information out. So we kind of have them explain that process to them, as well as going into some of the things that they can cover as to what the child disclosed to them during their interview.
Thank you. What is the most difficult part about your job that you, in your opinion?
Oh goodness, we'll be here all day. But the most difficult part, I think, is just, you want to do your best that you can for these kids, and sometimes it's not always the outcome that you're hoping for. So I think that's kind of like the hardest thing. You don't want to make any promises, but you definitely want to do the most that you can, and sometimes it doesn't always turn out that way, or maybe, what they want is not exactly, what may happen. So I think that's just the hardest part, is kind of struggling with that. Is you want to do so much for this kid because they've been through so much, and sometimes the legal system doesn't always allow that. They sometimes want life, and what they went through, the legal system doesn't allow for them to get that type of punishment. So I think that's just kind of hard, because you want to do everything you can for them, but then you're kind of also limited.
Okay. And what is the most pleasant part about your job?
I guess it's kind of like almost the same thing when you do get something good for them, or when you have a good outcome. It might not be exactly what you had hoped for, but in the end, if the child feels safe and they feel like justice was done for them, and when they are so thankful for it. That's, I think, the best thing, you know, when you do everything that you can and they're also, you know, happy with the result as well.
Thank you so much. Those are all my questions. We're gonna move on to Lada's interviewing the next person.
Okay, so what's your name and what is your job?
My name is Brandy Bailey, and I'm also a assistant district attorney in the child abuse unit. I'm the supervisor of the child abuse unit.
Okay, what connections do you have to Monica's house and how do you help them?
We also rely, just like Melanie said, we rely on Monica's house to do that forensic interview of the child, and so we assist them even, say if during an interview an issue comes up, law enforcement needs a question asked that maybe the forensic interviewer doesn't feel comfortable asking because of their training, but you know, we need it for the investigation. And so we're on call if they need to give us a call and say, hey, you know, how do we get this information out? How do we ask this question to make sure we end up with a good investigation? So we'll assist them in that regard. We'll assist them also with when they do testify to prepare them for that. We'll do sometimes even trainings for them, even when maybe they're not going to testify a particular trial, but get them ready for a trial that's later on down the road. Also, we all come together as a team to try to figure out how to work best together to make sure we get the best outcome in a case. And so we'll even talk with the therapist in the case and get them ready for trial, because as Melanie said, we use their expertise, their knowledge to be able to provide information to a jury that helps them understand issues like why a child doesn't tell about abuse right away, or maybe why a child even after they told about abuse says, you know what, this didn't happen, and they recant what they said even though they actually did go through that abuse. And so I think just building relationships with them so we all can provide each of our specialized knowledge to get a better result in the end for a child.
Have you ever had to testify?
I've never had to testify, but I have come close. But usually I'm the attorney handling the case, but there was a case years ago that we investigated here locally, and I assisted with search warrants and things like that for the detective, and we discussed the case in the very beginning, and it ended up being prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office. And because I was involved in the investigation, they came really close to having me testify. I was actually standing outside the doors, and then at the last minute they decided not to have me testify. So I felt the stress of about to walk in, but haven't actually had to go through that.
What do you think is the most important part of your job?
I think the most important part of my job is understanding that our role is to ensure that justice is done, and keeping an open mind and what that looks like. And understanding, like Melanie said, sometimes that means you won't necessarily get the outcome that the family wants. Sometimes that means that you have to understand that maybe this didn't happen and maybe we shouldn't proceed. And that's really a hard thing to do when you have maybe a child seeing that something awful has happened to them, and trying to still look for the truth no matter what, and not going in with blinders, but having an open mind.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I'm gonna be interviewing the last person. So what is your name? What is your job?
My name is Art Villarreal. I'm also an assistant district attorney, and I'm the supervisor of the domestic violence unit.
So how did the child abuse unit, how was it formed?
So back in January of 2013, Mr. Sines, Luis C. Sines, our district attorney, he took office, right? And I was a prosecutor under him. And myself and another prosecutor, Stephanie Rollins, we were general prosecutors. We handled every single type of case within the court system. And we just felt like these cases didn't get the attention that they needed in order to get the best outcome in the judicial process. So we approached Mr. Sines and we said, we really would love to have a specialized unit that handles just these cases so that we have that extra time to sit down with that child and prepare them for trial. Because just like you pointed out, you have to take special time with kids, because you can't just throw them in the courtroom like maybe you could talk to a witness on a Friday and put them in a courtroom on a Monday and they're good to go. A child, you just can't do that, or not if you want them to feel as secure as they possibly can, right? And we had heard that other counties throughout the state had specialized units, and it helped them to get a better outcome. And we actually had partners within the Children's Advocacy Center, Maggie's and Monica's house, and also our sexual assault nurse examiner, who was telling us, y'all need to do this. Your county is large enough, you'll need a specialized unit. And so we approached our boss and we said, hey, we want to do this. And he gave us the go ahead and has been supporting us ever since. And so that started in July of 2013. And we've had different prosecutors come and join us throughout the years. But Melanie has been the one that's been the longest that's been with me since we started it. And we have right now 2 prosecutors, a paralegal, and an investigator that we just handle these types of cases.
The 2 prosecutors mean just me and her.
Yes.
Not in addition.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
My name is Jessica Davila and I work at Monica's house.
My name is Caitlin Garcia and we are from Troop 27 and we are working on our Silver Award. So I'm going to be asking you some questions about what you do here at Monica's house and your job, and just some just to see what we get a feel like about your position here at Monica's house. So how long have you worked here?
I've been working here since January of 2020. I started as a family advocate, and then I went to training and I started interviewing.
Okay. What are some questions that you have asked the kids? Do you go really personal, or do you just kind of start off slow?
Well, within the forensic interview, it's a semi-structured narrative process. So with each kid, it varies depending on the allegation of the case. We try to ask as much open-ended questions as we can. That's our goal, because what we want is for that kid to be able to tell us in a narrative way what the event happened.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you guys consider yourselves as a superhero, or do you feel kind of a relief after interviewing each child, knowing that you did something really good, or you helped them in a certain way?
I personally wouldn't consider myself a superhero, but I do consider that this is a super agency where I work at, because it's so I am the one that speaks to the child, but sometimes that's just the first step for them, just coming here and making that outcry. From there, they can enroll on our therapy services. We also have our family advocates who do a fantastic job in talking to the parents, and advocating for those parents, and also seeing if they need any help with any other resources within the community, referring them to what could be financial assistance, food pantries, and other resources, great resources that we have here within the community. So I guess I work with superheroes, and we all come from a super agency.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so how many families or how many children do you interview on a day-to-day basis?
Well, it all depends. Right now, during the summer, it has come a little bit slower, but when kids are back to school, we're usually seeing among sometimes 8 or more children per day. It could be less, it could be a little bit more, but usually that's our max. Yeah, when we see big families.
Okay.
And that's just in one center, because we also have Maggie's house, which is in Harlingen.
Yes, yeah. Okay. And do you have a certain way that you talk to the families so that they're not how would they react to their being an allegation?
Definitely. I know that just coming here, knowing that there's an investigation or a case that's open, it could be extremely difficult for some of the families. I know we have children or parents that think that we're part of CPS and that they could come to our doors and just think that their children are going to be taken away after the interview, or not knowing what's going to happen from here. So I guess when they open the door and they see that it's a very homey and welcoming environment, I always try to explain to them I'm not a doctor, because I know children have seen me recently with face mask. I'd always tell them I'm not a doctor, I'm not a police officer, I'm just a girl who's going to speak to you, and you're more than welcome to step out of the room while we're in the interview, just to come and check if your mom's still here, you want to drink some water, if you want to use the restroom. So I give them that option, that they do have the liberty of telling me when they need a little break or when they just need to step out.
And how long do your interviews usually last?
Interviews are usually they could range from 25, 35, sometimes even an hour or a little bit more. I know it could be sometimes the topics that we cover within the interview are not easy for children. And we also do multi-session forensic interviews. So that means that when an interview or there's too much information to cover, of course that could be overwhelming for the child and even for myself or the investigators. So we try to break down that interview in different sessions. That way the child can have a little bit more time.
Okay, yeah. Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you. I got a lot of information and more an understanding of what your job is here, which is incredible. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. Have a nice day.
Hello, my name is Caitlin Garcia. I'm from Girl Scout Troop 27, and I'm here today at the Brownsville Police Department.
My name is Veronica Garcia. My badge number is 5886. I'm an investigator here with the Brownsville Police Department.
So, Ms. Veronica Garcia, I have a couple questions today about what you do with Monica and Maggie's house.
Okay.
So, what is your main role in, how do you connect with with Monica and Maggie's house?
So, in working with Monica and Maggie's house, I've been with the police department for 16 years. 10 of those years I did on patrol, and 6 of those years I've been working with the Special Victims Unit. Special Victim Unit, we usually call it is the Sex Crimes Unit. And what we do is we investigate crimes having to deal with sexual things in nature. So that would be whether it be dealing with victims of sexual abuse, things having to do with internet crimes having to do with sex involvement, whether it be photographs or sexting, which we know happens all the time. In regards to how we work with Monica's and Maggie's houses, well, those are children advocacy centers. So what we do is, I am not trained to speak to children as an investigator. So that's how we connect to Monica's and Maggie's. They are called child forensic interviewers. So what they do is they interview victims of sexual abuse. They interview witnesses who are of sexual abuse. So we take them there. And they'll interview the children. They have special training to deal with them. They can ask questions that we are not allowed to ask.
So how long, when you're interviewing, when you take you take the child to Monica and Maggie's house, and that's where they get interviewed, and then that's how you pursue with the investigation?
Well, most of the time, I do not transport children to the advocacy center. One of the special things about the advocacy centers is that I'm sure that you've already gone over there and speaking to you. It looks like a home. The reason for that is that the children are comfortable in going over there. A lot of people aren't very comfortable when they talk to us because we have a gun, we have a badge. And unfortunately, a lot of people, children especially, associate police officers with, oh, something bad is gonna happen. And we don't want that, especially because they've already experienced some type of traumatic event. So what we do is we have the parent or somebody of age transport them to these advocacy centers, and we try to stay behind the curtain. We try our very best not to make contact with the children so that they don't know that we're involved. Why? Because we want them to be comfortable when they speak to these interviewers. We fear that if they see us there, they'll maybe shut down, maybe not want to talk to anybody, because again, they associate police officers seeing the badge and the gun that, oh my God, something bad is gonna happen. They've already been through some type of traumatic event, something that is bad, and had some type of bad influence on them. So that's why we take them to Monica's house.
Okay, very good. So once they are interviewed from the forensic interviewer at Monica and Maggie's house, do they give you the information that the child has given them?
So we don't have any contact with the children. What happens is the way that Monica's house is set up, it looks like a house. It has several different rooms. There's an interview room, an observation room, and then they have a counselor there or a therapist that they have there. The interviewer is going to make contact with the child, introduce themselves so that they can feel comfortable. Once they take that child into the interview room, I will then step into the observation room. Like I said, I try to stay behind the curtain so that I don't make that child feel in any way, shape, or form uncomfortable. While the interview is going on, I will be in the observation room watching. And from there, if the interviewer has the interview with a child and I feel that there's more information that I need to collect, the interviewer at some point in time will take a break. We'll kind of go over what's already been discussed and determine, hey, you know what, we have further questions, or hey, I think we're done with this interview, and the child can be dismissed. Now, I mentioned that there is a therapist on site, and that happens again because these children have already been through some type of traumatic event. They may need to have some type of debrief with a therapist just so they can talk about the event, or so they can talk about what they just discussed, because it can be very traumatizing. It can cause some type of mental, psychological pain to the child, and the last thing that we want is for that child to go through this interview and then leave the facility with questions, doubt, fear, or some type of sadness.
And do you have any contact with the family of the child? Like, do you ask them questions, interview them, or how does that work? Since
Absolutely. So let me start from the beginning as to how we actually make contact with families and set up Monica's house. Usually we'll have a complainant, whether it be a parent or CPS. They'll file a report with the Brownsville Police Department in regards to an outcry. An outcry is simply somebody saying that something bad has happened to them. And the cases that we deal with, again, are sexual in nature. That report will get filed by a Brownsville police officer. That report will get reviewed by a supervisor, and then eventually will get assigned to one of the 3 detectives that we have in our department, which is myself, Detective Joe Martinez, and Detective Freddy Perez. Once that case is assigned to me, for example, I will make contact with the parents or the complainant of the people that are involved in the report, and I will ask them all the questions that I need to ask them. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. And where is everybody now? Okay? So once I obtain that information, if it is a child between the ages of 17 and under and can speak, I will set up an appointment with Monica's house, which is here in Brownsville, and we also deal with Maggie's house, which is in Harlingen, and there's also Casa Estrella, which is in Hidalgo County. We do our very best to accommodate the families. If it's more convenient for them to do the interview here in Brownsville, we'll do it in Brownsville, or we have families that live elsewhere, we'll try to figure out where is the best place for them, because the one thing that we want to do is show the family that we care and help them feel as comfortable as possible while they're dealing through this traumatic event. Even if they didn't experience it, everybody is suffering when they're dealing with these types of cases. So I'll make the appointment with Monica's house or Maggie's house or wherever it need be, and then we'll do the interview over there. So after that interview is complete, there's also another step that we have to go through with these cases, which is a forensic medical examination. Forensic medical examinations are conducted at Valley Baptist Medical Center in Harlingen through a facility called CAART, which is C-A-A-R-T. That stands for Child to Adult Abuse Response Team. They are a very important part to our investigation, just like Monica's and Maggie's house. Sometimes when they go for this forensic medical examination, it's like a doctor's visit. They'll interview the child, maybe if there's some type of evidence on their body that we can still collect, they'll go through that. If they are able to obtain more information that we either didn't collect at Monica's house, or say we haven't even done the Monica's house interview, we'll get that information from Valley Baptist and either re-interview at Monica's house, or make sure that when we get that interview at Monica's house, we introduce that information that we got at CAART.
Okay. So once everything is like done and you already finished like investigating everyone and all the witnesses, do you, and the case is like, what is done with the case? Like, what if the child, or the child, what if they're like, what if you need them to testify or anything like that?
So once I get the investigation, I make contact with Monica's house, where I go through the forensic interview, where I make contact with CART and we do the medical examination, which is called the forensic interview, medical forensic interview. We have staffing, and what that is that all agencies, anybody that was involved in the case, excluding the family, I'm talking about Child Protective Service, which is CPS, Monica's house, nurses at Valley Baptist, other investigators that may have had some type of involvement, we'll have a meeting and we'll discuss all the details of the case with the district attorney's office. The district attorney's office is the agency or the office here in Cameron County that goes to trial with our cases. We'll go through the case that we have and we'll try to figure out, hey, is there any more information that we still need to collect, and determine if we have enough probable cause to obtain a warrant so that we can make an arrest. Once we decide that, hey, you know what, we do have enough probable cause to arrest, I'll go ahead and submit to get a warrant. I'll take it down to our municipal court, and a judge will look over the information that I have on my probable cause affidavit, and he'll decide, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and allow you that warrant. I'll get the warrant, I'll get it issued and make an arrest. Once that arrest is made and I have a suspect in custody, they'll be transported to our Brownsville City Jail, where they'll get an arraignment, possibly get a bond. We have some cases where they don't get a bond, but if they do get a bond, they'll either pay the bond or they won't. And some people get released, some people don't, depending on so many other factors, immigration, other warrants, other pending matters that they may have. What a lot of our victims and citizens don't understand is that this is not a the next day process. This is a process that does take a while. We have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the person that we have in custody or have arrested for this case is guilty. Okay, so just getting a warrant, that means that there's a probability that this person did commit the crime. Now, when we go to trial, we have a jury of people who we have to convince, along with, again, the forensic interviewers at Monica's house, the investigators that were involved, the examiners from Valley Baptist Medical Center CART, all of us have to go up and present our case to show that, hey, you know what, this guy, this person that we have in custody or that we arrested for this case is in fact guilty.
Well, thank you so much for explaining everything, and you went really well into detail, and I really understood everything, and it was very well said, and I'm glad that I got to interview you, and thank you so much for explaining your connection to Monica and Maggie's house, and explaining what you do, what your role is in your job, and yeah, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.